ever made. It's very important to have the right framework. You need to have an approach to investing that's sound. And Graham's approach is simple, but some people adopt to it, and which I did immediately, and most people don't. But if you have the right philosophy, you will find opportunities as you go through the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And frankly, you're most likely to find them when in periods like 5 years ago when we were having the panic. I mean, stocks sell at silly prices from time to time. Most stocks at one time or another sell at very silly prices. And it doesn't take a high IQ to figure out that they're cheap, but it does take a temperament that's willing to step up and actually act. I tell people, if they're going in the investment business, if you got 160 IQ, sell 30 points to somebody else because you won't need it. I mean, I figured out very early, you don't have to be that smart in this business, which is fortunate, but you do have to have the right temperament. And you have to be able to ignore what other people are saying and simply look at the facts and decide, is this stock which is selling at X worth 2X? And occasionally you'll find things like that. And when you don't find them, you don't do anything. So that's my generalized stock tip, no names.
I'll make it simpler. Just buy Bank of America and you'll be set.
Yeah.
It worked all right for him.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Next question. Sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Nicholas Walker. I'm a sophomore in the SFS as well. So Mr. Buffett, in the past you invested in China, South Korea, and Israel. And recently you partnered with 3G Capital and Jorge Paulo Lemann from Brazil over for the Heinz deal. Does this mean, are you tempted to venture into the Brazil market next?
I didn't get the question.
The question, you did the Heinz deal. The question is, are you going to invest in Brazil next?
I don't know where I'm going to invest next. That's what makes my job interesting. I mean, I'm not kidding. I mean, if you went out and played golf and every drive went in the hole, you'd give up. The game wouldn't be interesting. I mean, what's interesting is when you get in the rough and have to come out and a few things like that. So I love the fact that I don't know what I'm going to do next. You mentioned the Israel investment. In 2006, in the fall, I got a letter from a fellow, and I never heard of him, and I never heard of the company he was talking about. But he said, my name is Eitan Wertheimer, and I want to tell you a little about my company, Ishkar. The letter was a page and a half long, and he said, if he sold the company, the family sold the company, the only company they wanted to sell it to was Berkshire Hathaway. And if I was interested, they'd be glad to come over from Israel and explain it to me. And it just jumped off the page that this was an interesting idea. So I emailed them, and they came over very shortly, and we bought the business. We handed them $4 billion for 80% of a company where I'd never seen it or anything. Eitan kept saying, you got to come over to Israel and see the plants and everything. You won't believe how wonderful they are. And I said, Eitan, I don't go to Council Bluffs, Iowa. You know, I mean, I am doing fine in Omaha. And he said, no, you got to see it. I said, no, I said, we can make a deal without seeing it. He said, well, if you buy the company, will you come and see it? I said, if we buy the company, I'll come. So we bought the company, and I went over there, and it's true. I've never seen plants like this. It was the greatest operation I've ever seen. And Eitan said to me, he said, you know, that's why I want you to come over to see these things. I said, listen, Eitan, if I'd come and seen them, I'd have paid more money. So we have a wonderful partnership with the people in Israel. But I don't know tomorrow. Our partnership with the people in Brazil, with Jorge Paulo Lemann and his associates, they are sensational people. I got to know Jorge Paulo when I was on the board of Gillette with him. And the opportunity to buy into a wonderful business like Heinz and to be partners, and they'll do all the heavy lifting. They run the place with Jorge Paulo and his associates. I mean, it's a great opportunity for us. And I don't know what the opportunity will be tomorrow. With Jorge Paulo, as last December, I was going out to Boulder, Colorado, where he had a group that met, and he said, I think I've got an idea might interest you when I get out there. And so I went out there, and as we came back on the plane, he explained what he was thinking about in terms of Heinz, and I said, count me in. And I will tell you one other thing, which is quite impressive about him. After I said that and went a little further in the thing, he sent me a one-page governance description of how it would work between the two of us, and he sent me a very brief description of what he thought would be a fair deal for both of us. I didn't have to change a word. I mean, those are the kind of people you like to associate with.
You mentioned that people will make the same mistakes in terms of the boom-bust cycle. But there have been several recent financial developments, such as the creation of derivatives, which has since exploded recently, and you once called derivatives weapons of mass destruction.
Right.
Now that derivatives are a $700 trillion industry, do you see this as setting the stage for the next financial crisis?
It's very hard to tell that, we've enacted Dodd-Frank, and if you look at what happened in September and October of 2008, there were some extraordinary things done. The Federal Reserve poured $85 billion into AIG, and if they hadn't, our world would be very different. Hank Paulson guaranteed money market funds at a time when 30 million Americans with money market funds were panicking, and when 300 billion in 3 days had gone out of the non-government money market funds, 125 of it had gone back into the government. 300 billion, that was almost equal to the deposits of Wells Fargo or Wachovia at the time, which were then two separate institutions. Both of those authorities have essentially been taken. I don't think they can do that under Dodd-Frank. I don't think that Bernanke could do what he did, and I don't think that Paulson can do what he did. When there's a panic, the only thing that will stop it, basically, is when somebody who has the ability and the will says, I'm going to do whatever it takes. And basically, that's what Bernanke and Paulson, and finally, Congress in a kind of a reluctant way, but said to the American public, and you could believe it. If Bernanke said, I'm going to do whatever it takes, nobody knows what Section 13(3) of the Federal Reserve Act is, and it wasn't probably meant to do what he did with it, but he did it. And the same way with they call it the Exchange Stabilization Fund of the Treasury. It was enacted back in 1934. Nobody dreamt it would be used to take care of money market funds. But you had these strong characters who had the ability to print money in the case of Bernanke, and they said, we're going to do whatever it takes. And the president was behind them. That is the way you end a real panic. And I worry actually that Congress doesn't like to give anybody that much authority, and it bothers them that the Fed has all this authority, or that Paulson acted as he did in TARP. And I tip my hat to them, and I'm not sure. There will be another panic. Where it comes from, who knows? But when that time comes, the question will be, are the people who have panicked, who have frozen, who have caused the economic engine to stop, will they believe and come right back and be doing something? And I'm not sure whether what's been enacted is a plus or a minus in that regard. Regardless, the country will come through, but it's very hard to write regulations that will keep people from acting foolishly, particularly when acting foolishly has been proven very profitable over the preceding few years. It's just the way it works. Humans, they all think they're Cinderella at the ball, and they think, as the night goes along, the music gets better and the drinks flow and everything, and they think they all think they're going to leave at 2 minutes to 12. And of course, there's no clocks on the wall, and they're still dancing. So it'll happen again. But buy when it happens.
Next question.
I'll be buying.
Hi, my name's John Ruff. I'm from Georgia, so I'm familiar with the work over at Eastlake.
Oh, that's great.
Appreciative. But you talked a little bit about income inequality. But if you look at class mobility rates, and if you look at average household income for middle-class families, measured with inflation, a lot of these rates have been trending down since the 1970s. And some may argue that it's harder today for the middle class than it's been in 30 years. And I was wondering if you had any more thoughts on how a rising tide can lift all boats and not just the yachts.
Yeah. Well, that's what's happened. It's like John Kennedy talked about, a rising tide lifting all yachts. And the yachts have been lifted, like I say, for the top 400 from 300 billion to 2 trillion just in the last 20 years. There is a very I think, structural problem as a market system gets more and more specialized. If you go back to an agrarian society like we had a couple hundred years ago with most people working on a farm, most people fit most job requirements. I mean, it was that as the world has become more and more specialized, I think we keep moving away from that. So a market system will not pay well for a significant percentage of society. They aren't needed to keep GDP itself going up and people at the top. And I think government has to address that. I think I sometimes toss out to students this proposition. Imagine that it's 24 hours before you're born. And you're sitting there, Johnny or Joni, we don't know yet, and you're in the womb, and the genie comes. And the genie says, John or Joni, you strike me as a remarkable potential human being, and I'm going to give you an enormous responsibility. I'm going to let you decide the world, how the world is going to work into which you're going to emerge. You can decide on the economic system, the social system, the political system. You design it. And whatever you design, that's going to be the system in which you live, your children live, grandchildren live. And you, being wise beyond your minus 24 hours of age, say, I know all about you genies. What's the catch? And the genie says there's one catch. Just before you emerge, having designed the system, put it in cement, you're going to go over to that barrel over there that has 7 billion slips in it, one for every human being in the world, and you're going to pull out a slip. It may say male, it may say female, it may say white, it may say black, it may say infirm, it may say strong, it may say bright, it may say below average, it may say United States, it may say Bangladesh. Now, not knowing which ticket you're going to pull out, what kind of a world do you want to design? Well, you certainly want to design a world that produces lots of goods and services and keeps producing more and more. You want a lot of stuff around. It could be the world's fairest society, but if it's on a barren desert island, it isn't going to do anybody good. So you really want something that works in terms of output. But once you have something that works in terms of output, you certainly want something that eliminates fear from everybody's life. Now, that doesn't just mean a lot of cops. It means fear of old age, fear of health, all of those problems. And you certainly want a system not knowing what tickets you're going to get that takes care of the people that don't survive so well in that market system, which maximizes the amount of output, your first goal. And I think we've done a wonderful job at the first stage. We have learned how to turn out lots of stuff. We have not thought as much, although we've thought a fair amount. I mean, when Social Security came in and all of that, I mean, this country has developed in terms of thinking about how a rich family should behave. But we have not, I think we are in the stage where we need to focus more on making sure that the people who get the bad tickets do better than they are. And, we said that blacks were 3/5 or slaves were 3/5 of a person back when we started and said, we said all men are created equal in 1776, and in 1789 we said blacks are 3/5 of a person. We not only said all men are created equal, but in the Gettysburg Address, Lincoln repeated it. It was 1920 before we passed the 19th Amendment for women. So we treated women as an essentially different class for all those years. So I think we've gone significantly in the right direction in terms of behaving better as a society. And I think we've gone terrifically in the right direction in terms of turning out lots of stuff. But I think we have to address the question of how do you treat the people that are left behind in a system that maximizes the output of goods and services. And that can only come through government.
Good evening. My name is James Fishback. I'm in the School of Foreign Service, first year. It's no doubt that you're an outspoken fan of Ben Bernanke, but he's going to be stepping down in January of next year. Whomever takes over the position, do you think that they should continue the Fed's controversial buyback program? And if so, for how long?
Well, I think they should take Bernanke's approach, which he says he's going to keep doing it till he sees more improvement in the economy. And I think he's been mildly disappointed, not hugely disappointed, but mildly disappointed in the rate of improvement in the economy in the last few years, and therefore, just the other day, he said he's going to extend it further until he sees it. So he's not prejudging exactly when it's going to happen. He's telling you the conditions under which he'll change, and the economy is getting better. We are in an experiment which hasn't really been tried before. I mean, Fed has a $3.5 trillion balance sheet, and buying securities is usually easier than selling securities, as sometimes people find out. So we don't know how this game plays out. And just the announcement, whenever it was a few months ago, or the hint that tapering was going to occur, that had some significant market reactions, probably 100 basis points or so in the 10-year. And what will happen when they actually, if they actually try to deleverage the Fed? I mean, what has happened is the American public deleveraged and the government leveraged up through the Fed. If the Fed deleverages that in any big way, that will be a new experiment. And
But Warren, as we were talking earlier, the question is, when they do that, the economy has to be growing faster.
economy has to be doing well.
And the piece people don't take into account is they're clear that they're going to stay there until the economy grows faster.
And he has no pressure on him. In fact, the Fed is the greatest hedge fund in history. I mean, you've got $1.1 trillion financed by currency and circulation, which doesn't cost anything, and then you got about $1.8 trillion or $1.9 trillion for the banks at 25 basis points. And I mean, the Fed is going to make $80 billion or something like that. The Fed is the fourth largest contributor to the United States government's revenues that there is now. That wasn't the case a few years back, but it's 80 or 90 billion a year probably. And it is under no pressure, none whatsoever, to have to deleverage. So it can pick its time, and if you have somebody wise there, and I think Bernanke's wise, and I certainly expect his successor to be, it can be handled. But it is something that's never quite been done on this scale. It'll be interesting to watch.
No, it will be, and we've seen the lesson in the market moving ahead and back just based on the last 30 days. So I think we're going to take one more question, and then
Thank you so much.
next student.
My name is Xueli, and I'm from China. I'm currently a graduate student in Georgetown. My friend Dennis Zhao and I, we are both a very big fan of you and your friend Charlie. And we read his book, which is very interesting. He had this whole system of criteria on how to evaluate a company. It's all very confusing, but he said that Warren and I are always staying away from the industries we don't know. So you have candies, railways, and Coca-Cola. But now the world is changing, and we are living in a new era. The business models are changing. The B2C platforms, everybody is shopping online. Maybe in a few years, everyone is going to pay with their iPhones, and Bank of America no longer issues credit cards. So non-profit is a new model, and
So what's a dinosaur like me going to do? Yeah.
yeah, there's just so many things you don't know about.
He'll take out his flip phone and show you, so he's not going to be one.
This is my new one.
What?
It's going to take. It's going to
I
take.
just turned in the one Alexander Graham Bell gave me, but
So the question is, the business models are changing, the world are changing. The new technology, they're changing everything. There's no way you can just stay out of it and stay with the traditional. Now, for the private investors, especially in the venture capital industry, what would you think is the most important thing, the key in evaluating a company? I'm not asking about doing mediocre, I'm not asking about being average, but about excellent, remarkable. Just
Well,
name one thing.
the most important thing is to be able to define which ones you can come to an intelligent decision on and which ones are beyond your capacity to evaluate. You don't have to be right about thousands and thousands and thousands of companies. You only have to be right about a couple. I met Bill Gates on July 5th, 1991. We were out in Seattle, and Bill said, "You've got to have a computer." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "You can do your income tax on it." I said, "I don't have any income. Berkshire doesn't pay a dividend." He said, "Well, you can keep track of your portfolio." And I said, "I only have one stock." I said, and he says, "It's going to change everything." And I said, "Well, will it change whether people chew gum?" And he said, "Well, probably not." And I said, "Well, will it change what kind of gum they chew. And I said, well, then I'll stick to chewing gum and you stick to computers, you know. I don't have to understand all kinds of business. There's all kinds of business I don't understand. But there's thousands of opportunities there. I did understand the Bank of America, you know, and I'll be able, I'm able to do that. I'm able to understand some given percentage. But Ted Williams wrote a book called The Science of Hitting. And in The Science of Hitting, he's got a diagram, shows him at the plate, and he's got the strike zone divided into 77 squares, each the size of a baseball. And he says, if I only swing at pitches in my sweet zone, which he shows there, and he has what his batting average would be, which is 400. If he had to swing at low outside pitches, but still in the strike zone, his average would be 230. He said the most important thing in hitting is waiting for the right pitch. Now, he was at a disadvantage because if the count was 0-2 or 1-2 or so on, even if that ball was down where he was only going to bat 230, he had to swing at it. In investing, there's no called strikes. People can throw Microsoft at me and, you know, you name it, any stock, General Motors, and I don't have to swing. And nobody's going to call me out on called strikes. I only get a strike called if I swing at a pitch and miss. So I can wait there and look at thousands of companies day after day, and only when I see something I understand and when I like the price at which it's selling, then if I swing, if I hit it, fine. If I miss it, it's a strike. But it's an enormously advantageous game, and it's a terrible mistake to think you have to have an opinion on everything. You only have to have an opinion on a few things. In fact, I've told students, if when they got out of school, they got a punch card with 20 punches on it, and that's all the investment decisions they got to make in their entire life, they would get very rich because they would think very hard about each one. And you don't need 20 right decisions to get very rich. You know, 4 or 5 will probably do it over time. So I don't worry too much about the things I don't understand. If you understand some of these businesses that are coming along and can spot things on, if you can spot on Amazon, for example, I mean, it's a tremendous accomplishment what Jeff Bezos has done. And I tip my hat to him. He's a wonderful businessman. He's a good guy too. But could I have anticipated that he would be the success and 10 others wouldn't be? I'm not good enough to do that. But fortunately, I don't have to. You know, I don't have to form an opinion on Amazon. And I did form an opinion on the Bank of America, and I've formed an opinion on Coca-Cola. I mean, Coca-Cola's been around since 1886. There's 1.8 billion 8-ounce servings of Coca-Cola products sold every day. Now, if you take 1 penny and get 1 penny extra, that's $18 million a day. And 18 million times 365 is 7 billion, 3 less 730 billion, or $6,570,000,000. So annually, $6,570,000,000 from 1 penny. Do you think Coca-Cola is worth a penny more than, you know, Joe's Cola? I think so. So, you know, and I've got about 127 years of history that would indicate it. So those are the kind of decisions I like to make. And you may have an entirely different field of expertise than I would have, and probably much more up to date in terms of the kind of businesses that we're seeing evolve. And you can get very rich if you just understand a few of them and understand their future. But fortunately, I don't have to. I mean, if we go into Heinz, you know, and I look at people pouring ketchup on, you know, hamburgers and potatoes, I don't think it's going to change. You know, and the nice thing about it, some products travel. Some products don't travel. Candy bars don't travel well. I mean, if you look at the Cadbury bars in England, they don't sell well here. And if you look at the Hershey bars here, they don't sell as well someplace else. Soft drinks travel and ketchup travels. I like products that travel.
Warren, I want to thank you for taking the time to work with the students today. And I think for all the students out there, just think about this. This is a person who, with a passion, he still has at 83 to make that right investment decision. But importantly, what we talked a lot earlier about is the ability to try to do something with all that wealth that will help a pretty near-term set of goals in society. And I think you will find very few people in the world have been able to do both things so well as Warren Buffett has, and there's a lesson to learn for all of us from that. So thank you for spending the time.
Thank you.